first. Oh, I think you're still on mute, Fadzayi.
Yeah, can you give me access to share?
Yeah.
I just send the request.
Yep. Did that go through?
Okay, let me try. Yes.
Yep, I can see that now.
Okay. What is this? Okay. Okay. Can you guys see the presentation well?
No, I don't see it yet.
Or the presentation, you don't see it?
Mm-mm.
Oh. Why is
I maybe resharing it. It seems like it's stuck for some reason.
still not showing up?
Mm-mm.
Okay, let me try again. Okay, share. Can you see anything now?
Yep.
You can?
Mhm.
Okay, good. Okay. Okay. So, good evening, everyone. Thanks, Laura, for the introduction and for inviting me to come and present. So Laura asked me to come and talk about okay, let me make sure I'm actually sharing the correct I don't think I'm sharing the correct presentation. Let me stop sharing. Okay, I'm sorry for not being very organized here. I don't know.
The way it goes, isn't it?
Oh God, it shouldn't be like that though. But anyway. Can you see what I'm sharing now? No? I am actually really confused what's going on.
Yeah, I don't see you screen sharing at all right now.
Okay. Seems like I have two presentations that are that's not the correct one. Oh my God. I don't know why that's the one that's popping up.
Should we have Qwalen go first and then while you try to figure this out, Fadzayi? Oh, that's a different one.
Yeah, that's the correct one. So you guys can see this one now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. Okay, so thanks for inviting me to come and present. So my presentation, what I'm trying to focus on is using grazing and fire for weed control. And Laura asked me to at least talk a little bit more broadly about other tools that can be used for weed management besides fire only. So once in a while, I'll be mentioning other tools that can also be used besides fire application, besides prescribed fire. So when we are thinking about using fire or grazing for weed control, I just wanted to at least start by highlighting some of the things that we need to keep in mind or considerations for using fire and grazing. And the first one definitely is, what is your goal? What is the land manager's goal for using fire and grazing? And obviously, since this topic is about weed control, weed management will be the first one. But most people, most lands are like multi-use, they have multi-use potential or goals. So it also depends on whether wildlife habitat is one of your goals. And when you're using fire or grazing, you really need to pay attention to how that tool is going to affect those other goals. Forage production or quality for grazing, whatever you're grazing, whether it's cows, goats, horses, or anything else that you could be grazing, what are some of those characteristics that you're looking for? And then lastly, I would guess almost everyone that is a piece of land that they are burning, except if they are burning it to completely eliminate vegetation there. Vegetation, plant diversity would be one of the goals that maybe they want to promote in some of these ecosystems. So depending on any of those goals or all those goals and more, the fire regime or grazing regime would have to be adjusted to suit those goals. So then you have to think about what kind of fire frequency you need to use if you're going to continuously use it beyond just one time. And then what time of the year or what time of across the phenology of the plants that you're grazing. Phenology is like the growth stages of the plants that you're burning. What time makes sense for you to burn? If you're burning and you have a targeted species that is more vulnerable to burning or grazing at a specific time, then you really want to go and make sure that your timing of grazing or burning really targets that time of the year or time of the growth stage where your targeted species is more vulnerable. And the other thing that you could also consider is the non-targeted species, the more desirable plant species. Is there any way you can find a window of burning or grazing where the targeted species or the weed species is more vulnerable, while the other ones are not? And as we go through this presentation, I'll kind of highlight some of those, how to approach some of that or how to apply some of that consideration into practice. And then fire intensity is definitely also very important depending on what your targeted species are and also what are some of your non-target species, and other considerations like soil erosion, for example. So, so I just wanted to at least highlight for some people, for people that may be not familiar about like the fire history for this, for California, for most of California. You may, I know you may have at least heard about this or experienced this, that most California ecosystems are fire adapted. They evolved with fire, so they have tolerance for periodic fire, and it depends on the ecosystems you're talking about. And some of the examples of what can really show us that these ecosystems are fire adaptable is some plants that have underground or low growth points, especially the grasses that have low growth points, so the fire can come and pass through, and they can still survive and be able to continue to grow in the future. The other examples also are like shrubs, most of the shrubs can really resprout even after the fire. And then the other way also to tell is fire avoidance. Most avoidance for fire or grazing, like much grasses, most of the grasses in California, they mature early so they can drop the seeds early and avoid the losing the seed bank to fires. And then there are trees that have thick barks or they have thorns that will prevent them from being grazed intensively, or grasses that have thorns that also prevent animals from grazing them extensively or intensively so they can survive and be able to produce the seeds and survive into the future. And for most of the plants, they have secondary compounds that kind of sicken the animals or prevent them from eating a lot of them and actually be able to survive being grazed that way. And we also see some plants actually that require fire to come through to scarify them, especially trees which have seeds with thick seed coats to scarify them, and also they can go through digestion, showing that they're adapted to grazing. The seeds can go through digestion and come through the other side, still viable. So here's just an example to show, like, historically, the fire regimes in California have been more frequent than what we have been experiencing recently outside the wildfires that we are now experiencing more often. So grasslands in the past, the fire would come through on average after every 10 or so years. And then ponderosa pines fire would come through maybe every about 4 years, and chaparral would come through every 30 years. But recently, the fire frequency interval has expanded so much, and that's why I think we are starting to see so much extensive wildfires that are devastating. So moving on now to talk about weed control using fire. The first one that I wanted to talk about today is Medusaid. I don't know if you guys are familiar. I do have an example right here with the seed head of Medusaid here. It's one of the grasses that is invading most of the grasslands here in California. And another one that is similar in similar growth habits and also similar invasive qualities is called barb gourdgrass. So how they really manage to invade rangelands especially is that they grow, they germinate very early in the season, and they can also germinate all year round, depending on when the rain comes. And especially germinating early in the season, what that does to the a species that can do that is it gives them the advantage to really take advantage of the nutrients in the soil, and then establish their roots before competition from other grasses or plants that germinate later can even establish. So by the time the other more desirable species or less invasive species germinate, the Medusaid has established its roots and has kind of captured the area or the niche around them. So then by doing that, they actually kind of disadvantage other plants from not being able to be so robust and successfully establish the way they are. And then they stay green longer, which also allows them to escape the fire season, and they produce a lot of seeds. And as you know, annuals, the way they can perpetuate from one year to the next, they can only do that by producing seeds. And the more seeds any kind of plant can produce, the more competitive it is. And then they have higher water efficiency. They can survive on very limited amount of water. This graph over here on my right, hopefully it's on your right too, you can see that medusaid really requires the least minimum amount, the least amount of water for it to survive or to thrive. And then the other thing is that they have low nutritional quality. And when these plants are in a grazed ecosystem, having low nutritional value means that the animals, when they go through selecting for palatable or more desirable, more nutritious diet, they are not going to selectively graze this. So then that means that the animals will be selectively grazing other plants, and these will be kind of left to grow and thrive in these environments at the disadvantage of the more desirable species. So the reason why they are low in nutritional value is they are low in protein content. The rate at which they lose the protein content is so fast compared to other plants. So as they progress through their growth stages, other plants also decline in protein content, but the medusaid declines faster, so they are less nutritious. And they also honestly have high silica content in their stems, which is almost like they have sand in their stems, which is so not digestible. And also very low in decomposition, which leads these plants, because they are not digestible, they are left there on the landscapes standing. Over time, it leads to creating thatches, monocultures, and low forage value. And they also have these seed heads that can actually cause mechanical injury to the plants. So what I was describing earlier is what I'm going to kind of show you here in terms of phenological stages of plants and targeting the weed when it's more vulnerable, whilst the desirable plants are not as vulnerable to the effect of fire or grazing. So in this case, we are using fire for controlling medusaid or goldgrass or yellow star thistle. And what we have seen, research has seen that most of the more desirable plants or the forages, they grow early and seed earlier and actually drop their seeds before the medusaid or goldgrass or yellow star thistle do the same. So they stay green a little bit longer. And now what we can do because of this is to really use this window where I have this red circle, to really use that window to target fire being applied at this time. And so this will be, for the most part, this will be around like late spring, early summer, depending on the precipitation regime of that particular year. So this would definitely selectively impact the invasive species and use the dried fuel from the more desirable species to actually create heat enough to burn the weeds. This graph here, I was just trying to show that when we are talking about phenological stages, here I know I have months across here where we are assuming that in every part of the, let's say the state or where medusaid exists, around May is where we should start thinking of burning. But we also really need to pay attention to the environmental conditions across the areas that we are trying to start to control for medusaid, and really focus on the phenological stages instead of the month of the year. and make sure that we are going in after the desirable species have dropped their seeds and the seeds of Medusaid are still on the seed heads. And this is just to demonstrate an experiment that was done where burning was done at the same time, maybe around May, and control was very effective in Fresno, because in Fresno, that's when those phenological stages were pretty much well matched. But when you go to areas that get more precipitation and stay cooler and longer, the rate at which the effectiveness was not as great, especially in Modoc, where in May, that's when maybe the plants are just basically starting to actually start to grow. So really focusing on the phenological stages is what is so important, not necessarily thinking about it as every year we have to burn in May, but really paying attention to burning when the desirable species have lost their seeds and the Medusa head still have theirs on the seed head. So how do those growth habits actually facilitate us to pick that window to work? Is based on temperature variations between the seed head area, like the top of the flame, and the base, the soil surface, where if these plants have dropped their seeds. So what research on rangelands has shown is that the temperature on the soil surface is lower than the soil temperature at the top of the flame, which is where the Medusaid will still be having their seeds held there. So the temperatures at the soil surface is about 480, which is not hot enough to kill the seeds. Whilst the soil, the temperature at the canopy could get even up to 1200 Fahrenheit, which is hot enough to kill the seeds. And even recently, one of the research has shown that if you are burning and the awns of the Medusa head are burned, most likely the seeds are also not viable, which is very encouraging to know that you don't have to have very high temperatures or intensive temperatures for you to be able to effectively be able to control Medusa head. And here I'm just showing you another experiment that we recently did, where we were looking at timing of application of milestone, which is an herbicide. And initially, when Medusa head was at least started occurring here in California, people found out that applying milestone in fall as a pre-emergent actually prevented the rate at which Medusa head would exist in those areas. But what was prohibitive for most people to use that approach as a tool was that it was very expensive, because the rate of Medusa head that was needed for to be effective was very high, between 7 to 14 ounces per acre. But so a few years ago, we did an experiment where we applied the same milestone in spring when the Medusa head is just barely starting to seed out. And we actually found that if we apply a milestone around that time, we get way less viable seeds out of those plants that have been applied in spring. So which means that at the end of the day, at the end of the season, the amount of seeds, viable seeds that are applied, that are deposited into the soil is less. And also the advantage is that you also have the application is at a lower rate, so more affordable to more people. And then here I'm just highlighting other tools that can be used, especially mowing can be used in small acres, or high intensity grazing can also be used. And high intensity grazing is really useful when the Medusa head is still at the younger stages of grazing when it's still palatable. And you can also till and seed. So I know Qwalen is going to talk more about using fire for yellow star thistle control. And Laura asked me to talk about other tools that can be used to control yellow star thistle. And the reason why yellow star thistle is an issue, or its invasive potential, comes from it thriving very well in low light environments where there's no competition. Yellow star thistle just takes over and actually shades out the other plants. So it's really predominant in areas where you have north south-facing slopes and doesn't do well under shade. It can exist in areas where precipitation is between 10 and 60. So it has a very wide range in environmental conditions that it can exist in, and produces lots of seeds. More than 30,000 seeds per square meter can be deposited by high densities of yellow star thistle. And I think the most difficult thing is the seed viability, how long the seeds stay viable in the soil. It stays beyond 3 years, sometimes even up to 10 years. So controlling yellow star thistle is not something that you can do within a year or two and think that you are done with it. There has to be follow-up treatments, not necessarily using one kind of treatment. I would definitely recommend using some kind of integrated weed management approach, picking different tools that you can use to improve effectiveness as well as reduce cost and impact on the environment. So here is just one example of when you can think of applying an herbicide. Here is an example of when Milestone was used, applied in November. You can see that the effectiveness, the right side is effectiveness of control. In November, the effectiveness was not great because the plant was still young and it still managed to actually come back. And control improved between December, January, February, and then started declining again, effectiveness in March. The other tools that can be used are cultural tools like cultivating or seeding with more desirable species to at least provide that competition and reduce the light available to the yellow star thistle, which reduces its vigor to grow and thrive. And also you can use cows or sheep earlier on in the early phenological stages or growth stages. But goats, actually, you can use them after the seeds have, the plants have seeded. And actually for the goats, the seeds are very nutritious to them. They are high in nutritional value with crude protein of between 11 and 28. And burning is also another tool that can be used. I'm not going to talk about that because Qwalen is going to talk about burning. I'm going to tell me, Laura, let me know when you want me to wrap up again, so I can get ready to wrap up.
Perfect. I think like 10 more minutes should be fine, and then we'll switch over to Qwalen. And then I just wanted to throw in, Linda had a question in the chat. She said, am I understanding correctly that Medusa head seeds don't need to be completely consumed by fire, just damaged enough to be non-viable?
Yes. Like I said, there's more recent research that was done by Bartholomew from UC Berkeley. And what they found out was that when the fire comes through around Medusa head and the seeds are still on the seed head, and you burn those awns on the plant, on the seed head, effectively most of those seeds are not viable anymore.
Awesome.
Mhm. So moving forward, one of the other weed species that exist in our area here is Tokolodi. It's a non-native broadleaf plant. This is the seed head, how it looks after it has flowered. It's an annual and less, it's shorter lived than a yellow star thistle. A yellow star thistle can live even up to two years, but Tokolodi is an annual. So it grows, it germinates, grows, flowers, and dies in the same year. And the problem, just like a lot of weeds, is that it is low palatability, and it also increases erosion because it takes over space for other grasses that could be germinating around it. And some of the controls that can be used include chemical tools like aminopyralid and 2,4-D. And then you can also graze them, just like what I was talking about, graze them earlier on with cows and sheep, because they won't be able to graze them when they've flowered and they've these thorns on them. But goats, you can use goats to graze at this stage and beyond. And also you can use mechanical tools and biological tools, like the seed head beetle. The other problem weed in our area is Italian thistle. It's also a non-native. It can be an annual or biennial, meaning that it can some of its seeds can germinate, grow, seed and die within a year, or sometimes they can germinate, grow, and flower, but survive through summer and be able to continue to grow into the second year. They really thrive well in fertile, well-drained soils. And Italian thistle also really does well under trees, that especially in areas that have been disturbed. And then the problem is that they produce high density populations or patches, low palatability, and also increases erosion. And you can use similar treatments like I described earlier for the other two thistles. The other type of plants that I think maybe some of you could be dealing with and wondering if you can use fire to control them are perennial grasses. And one example that I thought about is Johnson's grass. This could be a weed in certain environments. And unfortunately, for the most part, perennial grasses are not very good at being effectively controlled by moderate fire intensity. What actually happens is that if you burn them in spring or summer, it actually stimulates them to, you kill the top part, but the root systems that are intensive underground will be stimulated to actually resprout and continue to, and in some times they actually separate into smaller perennial plants, and they actually can be more viable and more vigorously growing after the fire comes through. So they increase plant density, biomass, and quality. And so fire is really not an effective tool for controlling perennial grasses and forbs, except if you have extremely high fuel load, which will almost kind of like nuke the area. And most of the time, that's not what we are trying to do, especially if we want our plants to continue to graze in there. Or you can do that if you're going to be maybe seeding those areas again. But the disadvantage with burning, using very high intensive fires is that you actually also compromise the organic matter that is in the soil, which could reduce the success in the seeding efforts that can come afterwards. The other plants that I also wanted to just talk about is the shrubs or chaparral species. Fire could knock them back. Fire may reduce shrub encroachment for a little bit, but the effect will be short-term because most of these shrubs really sprout after the fire. So if you're really trying to control chaparral, the most important thing is after you've knocked them back with the fire, use follow-up treatments to continue to at least reduce their fireability. Maybe use herbicides or use mechanical means, things like that. And then I just wanted to touch on targeted grazing. So what targeted grazing is really is when we are using grazing as a tool for vegetation conditions, to improve vegetation conditions. In this case, we are using grazing to really focus on reducing weed densities in an environment. And the things that you really need to think about is, what is the animal type that I can use? If you're going to be wanting to push back like shrubs, you want to use goats because they are the good browsers, they're good at browsing. You also want to think about the number of animals that you want in there. And most of the time, if the intention is to really go and intensively graze the targeted species, you also need high densities of plants, of animals in a small area, so you get the plants eaten down and even trampled into the ground to kind of reduce their potential to survive. And then you also have to really be specific about the phenological stage at which you're bringing these animals, just like I discussed earlier on with medusa head or yellow star thistle and the other thistles. You can use cows to graze those plants earlier on and use high densities. But once the seed heads come up, you want to switch on to using goats, because the goats will be more effective in eating those, because they can go in and eat even with the awns and the thorns around the seed heads of these plants. So the plant characteristics, both chemical and physical, is very important. And also thinking about the cost and the infrastructure that is needed to especially increase animal density. You might want to use electric fences to just circle out smaller pieces so you can really hit them really hard when you want to graze them. So here, essentially, it's really trying to figure out what time of the year can you really make an impact on the less desirable species and not do long-term damage on the desirable species. This is just a follow-up kind of demonstration of what I was talking about, really thinking about goats grazing, browsing in more woody species, also doing well in yellow star thistle, medusa head shrubs, and being very good at potentially using goats for fire risk reduction in wildland urban interface. So really what I would recommend is really focusing on using the integrated weed management approach, thinking about weed management and thinking about the tools that can be applied, and mixing and matching them in a way that really can produce impactful results, but also minimizing ecological impacts on the environment that you are trying to control. And most of the time when you use integrated weed management, it has been seen that it's more effective, it tends to be cheaper, and also ecologically beneficial. So that's all I have for today. I'll hand it back to you, Laura.
Thanks so much, Fadzayi. That was awesome. So if everybody doesn't mind, we'll hold questions until the end. And right now we'll hear from Qwalen about yellow star thistle burning in Northern California.
Hey everybody, Qwalen with the Watershed Research and Training Center. Can you all hear me all right?
Yep, we gotcha.
Okay, perfect. I've been on the edge of cell reception and just had a big thunder system move over, so it's been a bit spotty. We just wrapped up prescribed burning, focusing on meadows about 10 days ago up here. And then I can't tell by my face, I just went and spent 10 days hiking on some glaciers. Yeah, I just want to pre-warn you all that I'm not typically a Zoom presenter. Normally I'm presenting on whiteboards and bulletin boards, and normally present in person. So this is a great stretch for me. Thanks so much for inviting me to be here. I just want to acknowledge too that, you know, I am still a student of all this. My primary base is in being a fire practitioner and putting fire on the ground. Thank you so much, Fadzayi, for all of that well laid out research. That is not where my head's at or how my head works. I have put a lot of fire on the ground with star thistle in consecutive years, and I have a lot of snapshots in my head of what works and what doesn't work, and how different things respond with different treatment at different times of their phenology. I started working with the Watershed Center 3 years ago and jumped right into the invasive species management. We had a big push from the local community to work on star thistle in particular, because it's, as it is in a lot of places, taking over the pastures in that area. And with all the research we did, we landed on the idea that 3 years of consecutive burning in that May-June window, like Fadzayi was talking about, is what really impacts the seed bank and the quantity of plants that there are. With burning, there's no method that I have seen that is a full eradication of star thistle. After 3 years of burning, we have seen around 90 to 95% eradication of star thistle. It also so happens that burning in that same time window, we're hitting the Medusa head when the awns are developed before the seeds have dropped. So we've been able to have a pretty heavy impact on both of those species by burning. For us, it winds up right about the second week of June, almost every year, first to second week of June. And it just varies a lot depending on your elevation, where you are, how late your rains are, what have you. And we're burning at a time of year when, so everybody knows star thistle. Like if you imagine star thistle, you know, you have your rosette on the ground where it starts. Sometimes it spends a whole year in that stage without flowering. But once it goes to flower, it sends up that stalk that starts to put out spikes. And as those spikes or spines develop, eventually a little yellow flower starts to appear at the top. And once that yellow flower is about half an inch tall, that plant has viable seed. The plant itself is still green at that time of year. And we're primarily using grasses and other fuels in that window right before the plant starts producing viable seed after it's put up a shoot but before it has created a full flower, to burn the meadow or the unit that the star thistle is in. And the star thistle is completely green. It doesn't consume. But after fire passes through, by the end of the first day, I mean, even within a couple hours, you'll start to see it start to get a silvery hue. And by the end of the first day, all of the flower stalks are starting to droop. And, you know, after 3 years of burning, this past June was our 3rd year in a lot of our units. And it was interesting where I was seeing that we were having such a heavy impact on the grasses there, Medusa head included, that there were a lot of areas where there actually wasn't enough dead material or thatch layer to carry the fire through the star thistle, even though we had that large reduction in population of star thistle. On the 3rd year, there was still a significant amount, you know, still within the 5% range of what our original population was that survived. So that's where, you know, other management techniques like Fadzayi's talking about come into play with that remainder. I've seen plots at Big Chico Creek Ecological Reserve that were really interesting to me. They've done study plots for, I believe it's 8 years now, where they have took a whole field of star thistle and they sectioned off an area and they just mowed it. And they sectioned off another area and they mowed and burned it in the June burn window. And they sectioned off another area and they just burned that in the fall as consecutively as they could, season permitting, you know, permits permitting. And what they saw over time was that just mowing it didn't do a whole lot. When you mow star thistle, it will resprout with more sprouts, but shorter, and potentially be creating more seeds, you know, quantity of seeds. I don't know. I'm not a researcher, but it resprouts pretty vigorously if you mow it. When you use fire to burn it at the base, it doesn't resprout. And, you know, with the plot that they were burning in the fall and only in the fall, this plot area also had Medusa head mixed in with it. But the area that they were burning only in the fall had Medusa head, it had star thistle, but the native rye and other native bunch grasses were out competing the Medusa head and the star thistle. One thing that we've seen a lot with the Medusa head is that the thatch layer that Fadzayi was talking about can sometimes be many inches thick. And not only is that plant super high in silica and hard for most animals to digest, but it creates that thatch layer that makes it hard for other seeds to germinate. And one of the theories that the folks at Beeser had was that the fall burning, if you remember, as Fadzayi was saying, the Medusa head is an early germinator. And, you know, it may germinate with the first heavy dews or with the first rain, whereas a lot of natives will hold out and wait until they know that there is more higher likelihood of consistent rain to germinate. And the theory is that if you send fire through a grassland after Medusa head has germinated, before the natives have germinated, you're able to use that existing thatch layer to kill all of the little sprouts that are coming up of the super anxious invasive grasses. And the natives will come in after that. So, I just also like want to bring into perspective the question that I always have is, wherever I'm burning, whatever it is what are the objectives? Like, what is our end state? Our end state, yes, is no star thistle. Great. But what do we want to have is the question that I have for folks. And how do you promote what you are wanting to have? Another thing I've seen really effective with star thistle is consistent watering. It's a plant that in a few years, I don't know if it is I don't know exactly what it is. Maybe Fadzayi has some more answers to this, but farmers that water their fields consistently have very little star thistle. Whether that kills the seeds or it's hard to germinate or the plant doesn't like having its feet wet, I don't know, but that is something that I have seen across the board. Another point I wanted to bring up, while we're talking about burning star thistle is just the reality of putting fire on the ground in June. And that's, we do live in fire adapted ecosystems for the native plants, and there is frequent fire in these ecosystems, and fire behavior is changing, and a lot of people have the trauma and challenges around fire, and to put fire on the ground in June in a community, it takes some work. It takes outreach. It takes building up to. We started burning in late May and found that wasn't exactly what the plants were needing to cause the mortality that we were wanting. So we bumped into the first week of June. Now we're into the second week of June. And the communities that we're burning in have gotten more and more comfortable with it. We have a lot more community involvement. We have in Trinity County the Loudon Park burn, which was a burn in late May that was a meadow burn that was an escaped burn that burned up a couple dozen houses and a good chunk of a community. And that does exist all over the place. So, if this is using fire as a treatment is something that you're considering, just really consider how the best way is to build that bridge with your community, whether that's working with a public information officer, doing social media outreach, like a very strategic, well-worded social media outreach, whether you're slowly moving your burns later in the year as people get more and more comfortable with it. But just be sensitive to that element, I guess, is where I'm trying to go with that. Another thing that has developed for us over the last 3 years is our holding methods. For folks that aren't putting fire on the ground actively, when I say holding that, that's people that are holding your fire in the perimeter that you want to hold it in. So that's your suppression resources, basically. We started by, one landowner was really excited about using his dozer and cut dozer line all around our units. We burned all the star thistle out of the middle and then had a 10-foot wide dozer blade of star thistle all around the perimeter of the field that we had just burned. We've moved more towards wet lining and black lining operations where we're using fire engines or people with flappers and bladder bags to suppress the active edge of the fire and create either bring that suppression action down as the unit is burning, or preemptively go in and burn a 10-foot strip, putting it out with an engine on each side as you're burning to create your holding feature without turning the soil. All things to consider. Another thing I just wanted to touch on too is meadow burning is super cool. It's a great tool for folks to learn fire behavior. And how fire responds to wind, burning, and grass is super responsive. It's a great learning environment. And, when I started burning, just like, talking about the timeline of getting communities comfortable, I started burning in the Klamath back in 2008 with some renegade locals and folks from the tribe. And, the Mid-Klamath Watershed Council started doing more and more prescribed fire, and they have the Mid-Klamath Watershed Council and one of the tribes got a grant to buy air purifiers to give out to all the community members that would be impacted by the smoke, so that the community members felt cared for. And now there's a lot of support for prescribed fire in that area, literally at all times of year. I was up there helping them with meadow burns for star thistle and Medusa head. And our last burn was on July 13th. And we were actually burning in the evacuation zone of the Butler fire, creating one 6-acre and one 9-acre patch of black in these little in-holding communities where the community members could have a safety zone and the firefighters that were defending their houses could have a safety zone. It was actually a conversation with the incident management team where, the permits were already in place. The incident management team was already doing structure protection, and the RXB2, the prescribed burn boss for the Mid-Klamath Watershed Council, had a conversation with the incident management team, and they supported the burn operations happening. And, what that looked like for folks that are curious was the IMT was like, we support this happening, but we can't have any risk of this being associated with us in case something goes sideways. So what we're going to do is, they didn't outrightly say it, but they held off on creating that evacuation zone, a mandatory evacuation zone, until we had finished all of our burns in there. And it was literally about 3/4 of that evacuation zone was on fire before they finally declared it a mandatory evacuation zone. But that, over time has been the level of community buy-in that they've created in that area. And not only just with the community members, but with the CAL FIRE Battalion, Forest Service, and all the other partners that are involved up there, are in full support of burning at that time of year and see the benefits of it. So the incident management team pulled their folks off the hill at 4 p.m. We went in and started burning at 4:30 and finished up at 11:30 at night. And that reminds me of just another picture to paint for you. Like there's 2 times a day. I mean, sometimes depending on your day, you can burn all day. A lot of times when you're burning grass, your burn may start in the morning and you'll get pushed out of prescription by midday when winds pick up, when stuff becomes too hot and dry. The other option is to burn in the evening when your RHs are, your relative humidity is coming up and your temperatures are going down. So you're going into an environmental trend that will be easier to contain the fire that you're working with. But the tricky thing about burning in the evening, if largely in mountainous areas, is, you'll have your katabatic up valley, upslope winds during the day, and then anabatics at night. So that'll shift and go down valley in the evening. And in that time between where the katabatic and the anabatic winds are dominant, you end up with a lot of really squirrely winds. So that's just something you have to think about and be prepared for if you're choosing to burn that window. But honestly, burning at night is really fun and beautiful. And yeah, that's the gist of what I have for burning yellow star thistle. Yeah, I'll just hold it there and see if anybody's got questions. I did see the one question in the email that you sent us. I can start with that, or if there's anything else you got on your mind, let me know.
Thanks, Qwalen. Can I have you start with this one in the chat from Randall? It says, can we burn with a handheld torch if fuel is low? I think that's maybe talking about more like flaming with a propane torch. Is that kind of more what you're thinking? Yeah, that's what Randall's thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, that's one of the methods that you can go back in, you know, especially for those units that we burned this spring, where there may be clumps of star thistle here and there that are remaining, but the rest of your available fuels are consumed. So there's no risk of, I mean, no's relative, but there's minimal risk of starting a traveling fire at that point. Just a propane torch is enough to heat up the stems to kill the plant.
Awesome. Thanks, Qwalen. That was an amazing presentation. And then, yeah, if you want to tackle I emailed these guys a question the other day that somebody had sent in too. If you have any thoughts on that, or Fadzayi, if you have thoughts on it too, if anybody wants to jump in.
Yeah. I'll start on it, and then, you know, if Fadzayi has stuff to add, that'd be amazing. You know, the question was, if I remember correctly, there was a pile burn that took place, and now where that pile had been burned, it's a big patch of star thistle. And star thistle is abound in this area, and they've mowed it multiple times, but it keeps coming back. So what do we do, basically, and not wanting to use herbicides? You know, there's the pile burn scar. I'll start there. That is something I see a lot, where, you know, star thistle, I think, really thrives in dry soil where other grasses aren't as strong. So whether that's a mound of dirt or soil, like if you've burned a pile, you've increased and possibly burnt off a lot of the carbon or soil or moisture retention ability of that soil, as well as the nutrients. And it creates a soil by burning that pile there that is, you know, it promotes star thistle, basically. And, you know, I could like spitball a bunch of stuff off the top of my head about, like, you know, mixing some other sort of carbon in with that soil to change the soil structure, planting other competitive grasses, or, as I said before, just frequent water also can overcome star thistle. You know, in terms of mowing it, it's tricky. You know, I have a pasture. I've got 27 acres that I manage, and you know, there's an area that I've mowed 3 years and in a row, and there the native grasses are really strong, and they've come back and are outcompeted the star thistle. And there's another area that's a slightly different soil composition, where no matter how much I mow it and I take a weed whacker and I'm like weed whacking down to the dirt each year trying to get it before it flowers, it's still coming back. So in terms of mowing, it's tough, and it's really soil dependent. Yeah, that's the gist I have for that one. I don't know if you have more to add to that, Fadzayi.
I don't have like a real strategy of what to use, but I think what you were kind of referring to about because you burned and kind of cleared all the competition potentially there, kind of created like this environment that is very suitable for yellow star thistle. I totally agree with that. I know one of the issues is you said that site is, the person said the site is close to water, to a wash or a river, somewhere where you feel like you risk the herbicides flowing into that river, and you want this site to be kind of a park where people are going to be there. So there are there are a lot of limitations to be using things like herbicides, except if you decide to at least eliminate human contact for some time, so until you feel comfortable, and also going with the labels of the herbicides that you use to make sure that the chemical is at least decomposed enough and people won't be affected by it. I see. They are very you are limited for options, but I would maybe using a little bit of mowing, and then come back next year and burning, just alternating those two tools, which you feel like are easier to kind of use in an area like that, depending on how small it is. If it's small enough to mow, I would recommend potentially kind of using those as your two alternative tools in your box that you feel comfortable using. I think this question is the most typical example of questions that we need to pay so much attention, because we can throw all these recommendations at people, but it's the specific conditions that people are dealing with that just make some of these recommendations that we throw up that are so generic, not necessarily applicable to different conditions. So when I saw that, I feel like I really appreciated seeing that question, just seeing how complex management of some of these conditions, or in this case, some of these weeds could be based on what are the conditions or the characteristics of the environment, or the land use, how close it is to water and stuff like that. So that was a good example. I just wanted to mention that when we talk about some of these things that we talk about, we should not lose sight of how complex it is for each and every one of you to be taking information from this generic toolbox to really being able to apply it to your situation and making it work.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. We've got a question from Sean Hembry in the chat. Says, any thoughts about burning in an ephemeral water course, especially for Himalayan blackberry? I am also really eager to hear your guys' thoughts on this. We get a lot of questions at the PBA about whether burning blackberry is good or just encourages more blackberry.
I don't have experience with blackberry, unfortunately.
I do. Burning blackberry in various ecosystems. I mean, as folks know, the blackberry, likes areas where there's a lot of water. It's, really predominant by the coast. Farther inland, it sticks to where there's groundwater. It likes water year round. Blackberry burns so hot and so fast. And you can't kill it with fire. You can knock it back. You can weaken it by fall burning, is what the folks in the Klamath, there's a lot of basket weavers up there that have blackberry encroaching on their hazel patches and willow patches. So they've been experimenting a lot with spring, fall, midsummer burning. When is the best time to burn this to weaken the blackberry? And the theory exists right now that burning it in the fall, after it has produced its fruit, but before it is going into dormancy, weakens the roots so that they have less vigor the next year to resprout. Burning it in the spring, you're just going to get giant shoots again. And blackberry is also another tough one. That's, it's when I look at fire, it's like a tool to change the level of competitiveness of these plants, but it in itself is not a tool for complete eradication. And you can use it to shift that balance with other plants that are there. But for star thistle or blackberry, it's not something for those fast growing, large seed producing and resprouting plants. Fire is not something that will necessarily eradicate any targeted species.
Very interesting. Linda is asking, she's heard that grazing can be very helpful with blackberries too.
Mm-hmm.
Have you guys seen that?
Yeah, absolutely. Goats in particular. Cows kind of nibble around the edges. Sheep eat them as well. And I think I've seen people run goat herds through blackberries, and the goats can only do so much because they can't get in there because of all the dead canes. But that's where, you can burn out the dead canes with fire. And then if you put a high concentration of animals on that area, I do have a neighbor in High Palm that was able to get rid of blackberries by raking it with a bulldozer first to mash it all down, burning it, and then putting sheep on it for 5 years. She was able to get rid of the blackberries that way. Because
Wow.
the sheep eat so close to the ground. Goats don't eat very close to the ground. It seems like they hate the taste of dirt. But sheep will eat right to the ground, so they'll eat those little shoots right as they're coming up.
That's awesome. I really like the emphasis from both of you guys about kind of combined management tools, fire and grazing, or hand pulling and herbicide. Kelly says she has a tree of heaven problem, like several hundred trees on a section of property. Outside of cutting it all down, she knows it will all come back unless an herbicide is applied. Will fire help with mitigation of tree of heaven?
I have no idea. I have never burned tree of heaven. Sorry.
Fadzayi, you have any experience with tree of heaven?
I know there was a trial, not like real research that was done in Mariposa. Before I started, Maxwell did some research there where he cut down the trees and kind of put herbicide on the wound of the trees, and that was effective for some time. I don't know about burning, honestly. I just feel the fire has to be very hot. Alison may know this better than me, honestly, about the tree of heaven.
We've never burned Tree of Heaven, but we did cut and pile burn some earlier this year. I think it was earlier this year. And it burned really dirty. It put up a lot of smoke. It seems like they have a really high chemical content, I would say. And they're just gonna resprout from pile burning, but I don't know about prescribed burning them. I think what I've heard is herbicides your best bet for killing them, especially because they have shared root systems. So you can burn a little bit of them, but they're going to pop up somewhere else off that shared root system unless you herbicide it.
I also agree with the practicality of burning tree of heaven too, because it seems to be just like more the one, when it's like the younger shoots kind of all close together, one stem, and then at the top there's branches. So you'd have to try and facilitate a crown fire, basically. So I think just like practically, there's going to be containment issues that come along with that. I think when we were doing that project, we were working with Lexi, a fire ecologist, and she was talking about the same method as Fadzayi about cutting and then applying herbicide to the cut stump. Seems like the best management.
I think there's also a method of like it's almost like a syringe where you just insert it into the bark and kill it that way, and then as it's pulling water up and pushing nutrients down, it's pushing that herbicide through its root system. So you could kill the root system simultaneously, and not just single trees through the when you cut and paint. But that's not something I know much about.
Edmund says regenerative ag systems focus on soil production and soil microbes can naturally be more resistant to star thistle. Regular animal grazing seems like a long-term great solution for me. Long-term star thistle control, especially if I plan to grow food systems. Are there any recommendations on sheep breeds for our area?
And Edmund, if I'm correct, is up near the Tuolumne border in like
Coulterville.
Yeah, Coulterville area.
I can't come up with recommended breeds off of my head. I can send you some information if you want me to follow up with that information. But I can't recommend like specific breeds off of my head at the moment.
Awesome. Does anyone else have other questions? Feel free to just shout them out or throw them in the chat. All right, great. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining. Again, I just want to remind you guys to please take this survey at the end. And then if you are interested, it looks like there's some interest in seeing Fadzai's suggestion for sheep breeds. Just drop your email in the chat and I'll make sure that Fadzai gets those. And then, yeah, please do take that survey. And thank you so much to our fabulous presenters, Fadzai, Qwalen. Thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge with us.
Yeah, thank you all for having us.
Thank you for having us. I dropped my email in there if somebody wants to get a hold of me and have any follow-up questions.
What was that, Qwalen?
I'll throw my email in as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
That was fabulous. Thanks.